Welcome to Founder Stories. Today with me we have David Friedberg from Climate Corp.
Hey, Mike.
Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So tell us a little bit about Climate Corp.
So the Climate Corporation was started about 6 years ago. The original concept behind our business was that we wanted to solve a fundamental problem, which is that the weather causes financial loss to millions of businesses around the world. And in 2009, we focused the business exclusively on the agriculture market. So our initial product set was very simple. You tell us the weather that causes you financial loss. You can buy an insurance policy online. We'll pay you automatically for bad weather that would cause a loss to your business. So think about the ski resort that shuts down when there's not enough snow, or the lemonade stand on the corner that shut down when it's raining, or the ballpark that doesn't play a game if the weather's bad. And so we eventually identified the best market for what we were doing was agriculture. And we found out that most farmers are very sort of thin margin businesses. And most farmers are individually owned and operated businesses. And the number one thing that drives the outcome for a farmer's business is the weather. So we built products that are specifically designed to measure the weather at a farmer's particular field, estimating everything from the temperature, rainfall, soil moisture conditions in his field, how many heat units have accumulated on his crop, all the way through to identifying how the weather is impacting that crop during the season. And we eventually built these products that allow a farmer to then get paid for specific weather events that match the lost profit that he would experience at the end of the year. And now we've expanded the technology that we've developed to allow us to offer farmers not just an insurance product, but also a software service called Climate.com that allows them to log in every day, track what's happening at his farms, identify what he should go and do where, and do a better job planning and managing his farming operations so that at the end of the year, he can increase and protect his profits. And it turns out 45% of the world's labor force are farmers. So there's a massive opportunity. Farmers are just now coming online with mobile phones proliferating throughout third world agricultural markets as well as here in the United States. Farmers are just starting to embrace the concept of using software and technology to help them think about, plan, manage, and improve their business operations. And so it's a major problem and a major opportunity for our business. And that's
what a fantastic application of big data to this particular realm around farming. It's fantastic. So, where you're at today, you got about 165 folks.
That's right.
Been around for 6 years. You've raised north of 100 million. So your business is ramping very, very well. Tell us a little bit about though when you're at Google and you decide like, hey, I'm going to take the leap to go start this new effort, because obviously Google at 2005, a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, I actually left Google late 2006.
Okay.
I think when I joined Google, there was probably less than 1,000 people there, and by the time I left, there was over 10,000 people. So that's a pretty steep rate of growth for any company, and it was just amazing to see all the changes and develop the relationships at the time there. But it grew up, it became a big company, and I felt, and I've always felt like, for me, the best place is going to be a place where I can feel like I can make the most impact. And I saw a great opportunity with what we wanted to do with Climate Corp, and just convinced myself that it was worth leaving everything behind and taking the leap.
And when those early days, tell us about how you kind of assembled that founding team, especially as being someone technical who then took on the CEO role.
Yeah, there was a CTO that I partnered with. So the original sort of, it was called Weatherbilt when we started the company. And originally the technology that we built was in sort of this day and age very simple. We had weather station feeds from 200 weather stations, and we had historical weather data from those 200 weather stations. So using R, I wrote a very simple sort of model for estimating the probabilistic distribution of outcomes for any weather insurance policy a participant might want to buy. So they could type in the weather events, and we would basically look at the historical data, build a simulation of what the outcomes would be for payouts on the policy, and then estimate a price as a function of the statistical parameters of that distribution. And so I wrote a lot of the sort of pricing algorithms in R. And then my co-founder is Siraj Khalik, who was our CTO and was an early software engineer at Google. And he wrote the sort of front-end application. And that was our initial sort of quoting engine that we were able to take out to investors and show them the working model and eventually raise capital to start the business on.
And how did you go from the kind of initial premise around Weatherbilt to Climate Corp in terms of really focusing on providing insurance policies? And
that was a lot of fun. So in the first year, there was a lot of cold calling. So my first year in 2007, back in college, I'd done some cold calling jobs. I've had cold calling jobs in my past. So we cold called construction companies. We cold called golf courses, car wash owners. Like there were all these different markets that we had ideas for, and it was in retrospect, we can tell a beautiful narrative about how we found the
it was
agriculture
a straight
market.
line
Yeah,
that
right.
you got right there.
But it really was just a chaotic mess trying to figure out like this whole notion of like organized product market fit definition nowadays. Like that wasn't even in the realm of consciousness. Like it was like we were just dialing for dollars, seeing what was out there, sort of grasping for straws. And farmers just kept coming up as saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, and that there was this recurring opportunity. Farmers have about 20% operating margins. They're borrowing money every year. All of their personal income comes from the profitability of their farm. Farmers in aggregate in the United States generate $500 billion in revenue each year, about $100 billion in operating profit, so it's a massive market. And there's a lot of shortcomings in some of the federal crop insurance that's available to these farmers, and so we started to fill gaps, and suddenly we said, well, look, this is really working. We should, put some more proverbial wood behind the arrow and focus purely on this market. And then we started to build better and better products for that market. And every year was an iteration. Every season was an iteration, and we made lots of mistakes, and the business has nearly died multiple times trying to fix all the problems with the product and with the customer. And eventually things started to work better and better, and then we said, well, wait, all the stuff we've built, there's this product with climate.com, this service software as a service sort of product that we can deliver as well. And so suddenly, you get this sort of great vision for what you can do in the marketplace, and things start to click together and work well. But there's never been the sort of enlightened moment of,
Well, I think it's kind of funny. It almost feels like one of those dirty secrets that I think most entrepreneurs know.
Yeah.
But unless you've done it, you don't know, which is it takes a lot of scrappiness and kind of perseverance to just keep calling people, but also listening.
Yeah.
Right, and hearing what people are communicating to you about your product, and then iterating or changing as a function of that.
It's very easy to interpret the mundane experience as being iterative failure rather than iterative success. Like you're constantly failing until you're barely not.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got something that's working, and you've got some happiness and customers and things that are working in the marketplace. But there is so much more that goes wrong than goes right.
Yeah.
At least there has been in my experience.
I think that's certainly true in my experience. It's just you don't see a lot of blog posts on this.
Right.
But I think it's very, very true. So an interesting thing as you go through those kind of valleys and the peaks as you're doing that exploration, tell me a little bit more about the leadership. I mean, leading the company through that, because people obviously are trusting you to guide the company through those paths. But like, what did some of your like take-home lessons from that?
I think you I mean, you have to be a realist about what's going on with your business and respond accordingly and quickly. One of the things that I think is most, or at least one of the traits I've seen with some of the more successful leaders out there, is the velocity of decision making. So folks who want to make the right decision all the time that business typically ends up failing. If you can make enough decisions that are right enough of the time, your business will go through that sort of sine wave up and to the right, hopefully, and you'll actually, eventually find your way out of the dark ages. And so velocity of decision making, I think, is critical. You've just got to be willing to pull the trigger with indefinite information, with some sense of uncertainty of the outcome, and that means that you've got to be this eternal optimist. You have to be a realist about the problems and respond to them quickly, but you've got to always have some expectation of there's a better world out there, there's a better vision.
And you'll find that
and
way.
You'll find it, yeah.
I think one of the other kind of interesting things to couple that fast decision making is with failing fast.
Yeah.
Structuring the path so if that decision is incorrect, you determine it as quickly as you can, and there's no hubris to say, oh my goodness, I have to admit that was a failure. I mean, failure is typically a part of that success.
I think it's irrelevant. I used to play a lot of poker. So back in college, I played poker most days of my, most evenings, most weekends. And one of the things I learned playing a lot of poker was, you can't count the chips that you've already put in the pot. You've just got to look at the hand you have in front of you and make a determination about what the right bet is to make at that very moment. And trying to let the past sort of draw you back into a decision that's affected by something that doesn't matter anymore, is irrelevant, is critical, especially in building a business. You can't let the fact that you spent a lot of time doing something drive the decision of what's best going forward. Going forward, the universe may look completely different. A new card may flip over that should completely change your betting strategy. And you've got to constantly be willing to sort of let go of the past and embrace sort of what makes the most sense going forward.
Yeah.
Without doing that, you're inevitably going to be drawn into making the same mistakes over and over, or not being truly objective about the decisions you're making.
Yeah, it's great insight. So switching gears a little bit, you've got 165 folks, roughly half in engineering, and you've got, we talked a little bit about this before, about 24 PhDs.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how those teams are structured, especially because it's between San Francisco and Seattle, and how do you get those groups of people to work together to go tackle, arguably this really fascinating problem?
Generally speaking, we have, so we take in a lot of data, a lot of data. So we observe weather data, radar data, all the way down to a field level. We have a lot of geospatial data, 10 meter by 10 meter resolution tiles of the entire United States showing different geophysical properties, 4-kilometer observations of the weather that are made in real time, forecasts, physical observations. So there's a lot that gets ingested. So we have a platform team that's responsible for ingesting and making available data. We have an applications or product development team that's focused on building some of the applications for our customers. We have some research teams that do sort of more research-oriented work. So in our particular business, we have a climatology team and what we call a structures team. The climatology team is trying to do two things. They're trying to reconstruct historical weather data. So those are statistical models. There's a little bit of physical modeling involved. And a structures team, and the climatology team is also simulating the weather. So what's the distribution of outcomes? And that incorporates things like trends, climate change, significant climate indicators, so what's going on with certain climate patterns right now, as well as weather forecasts that come in every couple of hours. So our weather simulations can shift day to day pretty substantially for the entire United States where we're modeling the distribution. And then on the structure side, we're basically trying to do a lot of machine learning of what's the function of the weather that defines crop production or farming production parameters. So what's the yield of a farm as a function of crop planted, location, soil type, farming practice, irrigation type. And so all of those become inputs to our models. And so to solve those models, we have to take in lots of data about what farmers' yields are, what the historical weather has been, and then you're effectively setting some templates or some parameters that are based in the physical science of agronomy, and then solve for the parameter, the coefficients of the function using sort of machine learning techniques. And so there's a lot of different sciences that go into what we're doing, but fundamentally both of those teams are primarily built with applied math and stats folks. And these folks have more of a generalist background than a specialist background. We've had to bring some specialists in on the product side, but really what we're trying to do is take large amounts of data and solve functions that define something as a function of other things. And so, those teams, if you think about them, they provide a service to some of the application or product teams. So each of those teams, what we've asked them to do, and this is true for all of our product and engineering teams, is define that team's mission. So that team has a mission statement. So the climatology team's mission statement, for example, might be to do the best job predicting what the weather will be. And the structures team's mission will be to predict the outcome of farming production as a function of the weather. And within that mission, they now have a clear sense of what their long-term objectives are. So they can now split their time to explore some research interests that could potentially enable breakthroughs, and then say, hey, product team, we've got this great breakthrough. How can we incorporate this in our product roadmap? And then also service the product team with things that they need.
Okay. So that makes sense at your stage today. Just speak very briefly on when did you start adding in the objectives, kind of the OKRs, into those teams?
We started doing, as we started to get teams where having everyone sit in a room and have, I think it's once you can't have the one room sit down conversation is probably when you get to that point of sort of chaotic dissemblance and you need to actually have, some model for making that work. And so, whatever that one, how big is your room? So we could maybe fit 20, 30 people in that room. Once it gets beyond that size, then you need to set missions and so on.
Makes a lot of sense. And before we end, I want to hear about kind of this novel thing you put up with the kind of sprint batical.
Yeah.
And what is it? Why did you come up with it? And
well, because we hire a lot of, we have 3 key things we look for when we interview someone. Are they smart? Are they motivated? And do they have the skills for the job? So when you hire people that are very smart and very motivated, those people generally have a high degree of intellectual curiosity, and those are also where a lot of the innovations come from. So set a mission, find interesting opportunities for us as a company to explore. So we have a model that we call the sprint batical model. So 1 out of every 4 sprints, so you have about 2-week sprints, an engineer can take a sprint batical. And during that sprint batical, they set an objective and say, this is what I aim to achieve during my sprint batical. And it's basically free-form research. We found that hackathons don't provide really enough time for research-oriented scientists to have enough sort of research time and then development time to actually deliver a working prototype or output some interesting sort of solution to a problem that they're interested in exploring. And 20% time just doesn't work because it always gets sort of pushed to the side with immediate priorities and the immediacy in the business's needs. And so the sprint batical says, I'm going to carve out this entire sprint. you're still responsible as an engineer to report what it is you're going to do during that sprint, and you're still tracked. And then you give a presentation at our sprint-batical review every Friday at 3 p.m. All the engineers come in and they present to the whole company. What did they aim to do during their sprint-batical? What did they achieve? And it's yielded some amazing results. And I think it's a great mechanism for letting engineers sort of explore free-form research with enough space and enough time. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. When we first started Hack Week at Twitter, I did a similar thing by actually making it a week long because I just didn't feel like in a short period of time you could actually build something meaningful. Yeah. But on the research side, arguably, you could obviously require more than a week. So it makes a great deal of sense. I think that's fantastic that you guys have done that.
Engineers love it.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you for watching Founder Stories. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.